Amazon has been slow to deliver a whole lot of things, but they kind of caught up this week. And I have a 4K Logitech webcam that I had ordered like in March. It was not supposed to be here until like May because, you know, all of the shipping issues and prioritizing things or whatever. But it came today, which I can only assume is the work of the Holy Spirit because, you know, it just provided me with that extra kind of polished professionalism to have this awesome camera. So hopefully it looks good. I do get more questions about the microphone though. I don't know if anybody is kind of looking at it and go, oh, what is that? So this is a special kind of podcast microphone. So in my work, I do a lot of telehealth sessions. I do a lot of in-person work too. So I kind of already before all of the quarantine stuff had a lot of this tech already kind of set up. Because I see patients kind of across the state of Florida and Georgia. So this is a Blue Yeti microphone. So hopefully it makes it so that I sound a little bit clearer to you guys.
She said it has a swanky feature so that she can, oh, they have the same microphone in black. So nice. These are your people.
These are my people.
Came to the right talk.
Absolutely. I actually have two of these. I have one in teal. It's very, very nice. It's in my building, my office. This is my home office because I'm quarantined. But yeah, they do come in different colors and they're super fun.
I'm shocked that nobody has asked us about our window artwork that our daughter put together. So if you want one of those, Amy or anyone else, I'm sure we could hook you up. So.
Oh, wonderful. Now, what kind of tree is that outside your window? Because you guys have different trees than we do.
I think it's a dogwood, maybe.
It's got little white flowers on it. So pretty.
Yeah, it'll be spring soon, permanently soon.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think that we can go ahead and get started with your presentation tonight. We are very honored tonight to have Dr. Shannon Mullen with us. She lives in a small town just north of the Florida-Georgia line, made popular by the band, but still actually a real thing for people in her area, not just a country /pop band for people here. And she's going to be talking about emotional intimacy and just like emotional health and making sure that you're checking in with your spouse. She does some emotionally focused therapy, which if any of you came to the Love and Responsibility series that we did this fall was the same kind of therapy that the Marcotts were talking about in their talk. So you can always rewatch their talk if you want to after this one. And Dr. Mullen was hoping for this to be a little bit more of an interactive evening. So if you have any comments, questions, or anything that you want to share, you can type them into the chat, which probably is located on the right side of your screen if you're watching on a computer. And I think it's on the bottom if you're on a phone, but I am not 100% sure. And you can select your two to be all panelists, which means that both of us will be able to see it, or all panelists and attendees, and then everyone can look at it. And then if you have any questions at the end too, you're welcome to ask questions or use the question and answer feature. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the polling. We got some, like I have a sugar hangover. Only one person said that, but that's where I'm at. I'm just getting too old, and I'm very happy to see that Reese's won because that means that you guys all have excellent taste. So congratulations, that is great news. Tap bottom for a phone and it appears for hers anyway, Alyssa. Thank you, Alyssa. That is helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and mute my video and audio in case we have visitors at our house. And you can go ahead and take it away. Dr. Mullen, if you want to just share a little bit about yourself, and then you can go ahead and talk about what you're planning to talk about tonight. Yeah. So, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. So if it wasn't very clear, I'm in South Georgia. So it's been about 80 degrees here. We're in the fullness of summer just about. It was a little cooler today. So I am in a different time zone. It's a little bit later here, but I'm so happy to be on a date night with you guys. I am married almost 2 decades now with my partner. My husband is wonderful, and we have 4 children. And we also homeschool. So I don't know if there's any homeschoolers out there. There probably are some more now given the quarantine because schools are mostly closed, which is an interesting dynamic if you're unfamiliar to homeschool. It does change the family dynamics. Oh, you're homeschoolers now. I see that. Yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it? It is rewarding. It is rewarding in the end, but it is something. So I wanted to kind of start with a little bit of a story, because I was floating back to some of kind of my evolution and understanding how relationships work and how couples work and the significance of emotional intimacy. So I just want to clarify from the start that, you know, no matter where you are in your relationship, let's say you guys are like, you know, really strong, you know, just looking for ways to make it even healthier. Cool. This is great. This is going to be a useful talk. Or maybe, hey, you know, you've been home together for a little bit more than you expected this month. And you realize that you've, you know, got some rough edges here that need to be kind of worked out. And so this is useful to you as well. Or maybe it's been not so great for a while, and this will be useful, and this will be a starting point. So when I was thinking about the beginning of my work, especially with couples, I was thinking back to my first experience of couples therapy with a couple back when I was on internship. And I was really gung-ho when I was training as a psychologist, and I thought, hey, you know, if it's hard, I want those patients, you know, if it's really, really challenging, nobody else, you know, wanted those cases, I'm going to take it. I'm going to learn as much as I can. I'm surrounded by these great clinicians. So what better time to kind of, you know, test my mettle here, right? And to learn. So I had already done all this tremendous amount of, you know, severe psychopathology and a lot of trauma work. And so we rarely got couples that come in, and this is kind of the case in many settings, that couples generally wait too long to come and get any type of couples counseling. This was a very young couple that came in. And the training director said to me, like, hey, Shannon, would you want to do this? Would you want to, you know, work on this couple with me? I thought, oh, well, this is great. So I thought, okay, I'm going to save these people, right? I'm going to save their marriage. So we kind of get into the room, and there's this, you know, very, very heavy feeling. And there's this, you know, incredibly brilliant young man. I could tell he was one of the engineers in the engineering program. And he just had like a list. He was just like, you know, really prepared. And I thought, oh, well, this is interesting. And his lovely wife, who was just adorable, almost like, just like full of life. You could tell she was much more of an extrovert. She was just like, just staring at him, like unconcerned at all about his list. She was just so desperate to get his attention. And so we're kind of going through the motions here, just trying to understand what's going on, what are the issues. And he had kind of like, you know, he had things he needed to say, and he kind of got them out. And she just turns to him finally, and she just begins to sob and yell. And I thought, I need to get out of this room, because I did not understand what was happening. This couple could not be, it could not be more different than the other in terms of how they were trying to communicate the distress. He was methodical, he was organized, he was trying to, you know, kind of understand it in a very linear way. And she was emoting like all of this emotion and pain. What I didn't see at that time was that he was in as much pain as she was, but he was just expressing it in a very different way. What they both couldn't see at that time, and what is true for all couples, especially couples who are in distress, is they're desperately yearning for their partner. They're desperately reaching towards their partner, and they're doing this because this is how we are designed. This is how God made us. And it's also really how the whole entire brain is built. So when we talk about the relational self, we really mean who we are as people. So kind of fast forward a little bit further. So I want to get to the instrument I want to talk about today, is that when couples are reaching for each other, they're usually doing it in language and behavior that the other partner is not able to read. And this is a lack of attunement. This is a disengagement. This is broken closeness. Somehow we just assume that men and women would kind of, figure this out, right? That they would know how to express their needs, express their feelings. But what is very true is that that is a vulnerable state. And so emotional intimacy requires vulnerability. And this can create a lot of problems for people. And it is the reason why people then turn and pull away, right? Okay, so I have given our host, Marilyn, this couples check-in activity. And so I want to go through it with you guys today, because I really feel like it's this really useful tool to begin to move the conversation in our coupleship to the real stuff, the emotional content, the stuff that is going to be what brings us closer to each other, and what really makes us feel seen and fully known in relationship. And this is the craving of our heart, to be fully known. Recently, working with a couple on this topic, working through some of these questions on this activity, they begin to kind of realize that each of them are not able to be very open and honest. There's a lot of eggshells. There's a lot of barriers to them kind of revealing their full self and their experience and their weaknesses and their brokenness. And this keeps us separate from each other. And so this activity is meant to kind of break down some of those walls, so that there's a real honesty with each other, a real reaching for each other, and a real sense of being held. Okay. All right. Everybody with me? Okay. All right. Well, nobody's saying no in the chat, so I think you are. Okay. So this first part of this couples check-in is basically telling you have to do this on a regular basis. Now, I know life gets really, really busy, and it's easy to just kind of go for, I don't know, weeks and weeks and weeks and not really have an intentional check-in. Okay. I'm guilty of this as well, and I know better. I know that we have to have kind of time built in to just sit down and look at each other and to say, hey, where are we at? Kind of like a staff meeting for a relationship, right? Oh, that sounds really unemotional and cold. Okay. So this is an activity I encourage people to do on a weekly basis, but for some couples who are having particular trouble with attunement, kind of getting their partner and feeling like their partner gets them, I do recommend that couples consider doing this on a daily basis at the end of their day. It's really important for couples who start to notice that resentments are being built up to not wait the full week and to kind of check in more frequently. So the first part of this activity is to list and rate your resentments during the past 10 days. Now, when I give this to couples, sometimes they're like, oh, okay, there's four places. And they're like, okay, I'll turn the paper over and I'll write on the back the rest of mine. No. This is not a great idea. This is the beginning of being really honest with our partner about the things that are starting to bother us. Now, the reason why these things are important is that resentments can also be a sign that you have maybe not acknowledged your needs. Maybe there's a denial of your needs, and maybe you have a struggle in communicating your needs. So let me kind of give an example of this. So, quarantining. Okay, we're working from home. Everybody's working from home, and then there's also homeschooling happening or whatever. And trying to get lunch done, trying to get that assignment done, trying to get on for my next meeting. And I am feeling super resentful because where is my husband? he's probably on the phone on the couch, right? Now, at no point did I say like, hey, hon, I need help, or hey, by the way, where are you? Could you do this one activity with the youngest or whatever? No, I just let that kind of resentment just kind of mushroom, and I got, angry lunch was made, right? Because I'm just building up that resentment. And at the core of that, my insight is I didn't ask for what I needed. Sometimes it's because I didn't know what I needed. Maybe it's that resentment was building because I couldn't recognize that the emotion was growing of I feel alone, I feel overwhelmed, and okay, then I can use those emotions to ask for what I need. There's a rank on here as well, because not all resentments end up being a 10, and it's good to know that. It's good to be able to measure that there's going to be some low level resentments are going to be just kind of the course of the day and how life works. And so we're going to just kind of let those things go. But that we communicate that, right? Because that's owning our own experience and owning our needs. Okay. The next section is going to be to list anything that happened this past week that reduced feelings of closeness or attunement. So I see Father Sean just joined us here. So I want to kind of give some main examples of this. So most of the time it's this. It's you're talking to your spouse and they're looking like this, and they're texting somebody like, okay, yeah. So technology can be a way for us to reduce closeness and attunement. It also could be that, we're speaking to our partner and they're not making eye contact. They're doing some other activity. Maybe they didn't pause. Maybe they didn't ask us enough questions about those things. And this can be a really individual experience. So if attunement for you looks like somebody holding my hand while I'm telling them about an argument with a friend or something, then that insight is really, really helpful, because your partner will not know that necessarily, that attunement for you is physical touch. Or maybe attunement for you is I'm going to take care of the dishes because you look like you need to lay down. You need to have some quiet time. So that attunement can come in what we generally refer to as, some of our love languages. People are familiar with that, right? Yes, the checklist is on the Facebook page too, if you want to follow along with it as well. So knowing what are those things that break attunement, and that those are the things that my partner sees as things that break attunement, then I have the insight then to say, oh, okay, when he's beginning to share something with me and I'm, yelling at the kids to clean up the Legos for the 14th time, he doesn't feel as if what he's saying is important. He doesn't, feel heard, or that, I'm not recognizing maybe the concern that he has. You might be right by that, right? So there's not a judgment attached to these things. It is information used to alter behavior so that relationship, communication, and being with each other ends up being more fruitful in a lot of ways. Okay, moving down through. All right, the next section is to rate your feelings of forgiveness. Now, I want to highlight how important this section is, particularly for those of us who may have some history with wrong treatment or betrayal or abuse, that a lot of times we carry into our new relationship issues of unforgiveness and hurt that we may feel is about our current relationship, but it may have longer roots. It may have, ties to things that are old wounds that need to be healed in different ways. What is true usually about this section is that you can notice a pattern. So when we have issues of unforgiveness, they tend to follow very similar themes. So if one feels as if, it's always kind of left alone, maybe that was your story. Maybe you didn't get, the sense that you were important to the family in some way. that feeling of unforgiveness can move forward into your current relationships. And some of those kind of failures to attune can be felt like that, even though that's not the actual meaning of intent in those interactions. So the forgiveness scale here, and it goes from 1 to 10, is a way of checking in about hurt, about woundedness, and to track this over time, that when we kind of hover in the 8s and 9s on this forgiveness issue, then that's probably a sign that there's a deeper healing that needs to happen. It also could be related to, past betrayal within your current relationship. Has that been adequately healed? Have we kind of glossed over it? Have we kind of buried it but never really reconciled it or dealt with it? This is a great measure. This particular, it's almost like the canary in the coal mine. So if this continues to kind of float in the higher numbers, then there's some deeper kind of reflection and internal soul searching that could potentially be useful. Okay. All right, so we have a series of questions towards the end here, and these are the meat. I mean, they really are. These are kind of the gold questions here. List one thing you did this past week to make your partner's life more difficult. So you'll notice that the virtue required to answer this question is humility, right? So like, where have we failed? Where have we failed in charity? Where have we failed in kind of attuning and understanding? Some of these things could be, very, very simple things that it's like, I really apologize for that. I was short with you, or I know you told me that, you needed me here by this time and I didn't write it down. I totally blew that. I went and did another errand instead. Just saying that out loud is a way of saying to my partner, hey, your experience of that is important. It's valid. I regret that I was a part of that. And it's so healing for that partner to hear that it's recognized that, yeah, that kind of transgression, was seen and understood, and that there was an opportunity to heal on that particular issue. And see, so this is another reason why it's not good to only do this once a month, because there could be a couple other nuggets in that month where they needed to be addressed, and it needed to be addressed overtly. When I work with individuals in the, in the state of for the recovery work, it's making amends. It's saying, hey, I recognize where I have failed the expectation of our relationship. The expectation of my love for you and the promises I've made for you. And, and here's how I'm going to, do things differently. And here's how I'm going to repair that. So it's a very important question. Also really makes the partner feel like really seen. It's like, yeah, you saw how difficult that was for me. Okay. The next two questions are kind of tied together. List one example of a sign you observed in your partner that your partner needed support. I can't tell you how difficult this question is for most people to answer, right? It's like, what are the cues in your partner that say they need help? Because often our partner is not going to be like, hey, by the way, I need something, right? We're terrible at doing that. We're terrible at asking for help, particularly as Americans. Like, we're just, and that's all tied up in our pride as well, right? It's all tied up also in a history of maybe reaching for someone or asking for something we need and it not being there. So I would say that this is a question that almost in the beginning, almost everybody's like, I really don't know how to answer this question, right? So, what are the signs that my partner, needs support? So I would almost answer this question today by doing our family rosary and Divine Mercy tablet before we're doing this tonight. I'm trying to get it done, and my husband starts to fall asleep during the family rosary, and I'm like, oh, he's more tired than I thought. And I feel really awful. Like all day I got really frustrated with him because I'm telling him things and he's like asking me the same thing over again. He's like, what time were you doing that thing? Whatever. I'm like, I just said it 3 times. I'm getting really short and resentful. I'm like, he's not listening to me. I'm like, oh, you've been up since 3 a.m. I missed that. Okay. So all through that day, I totally missed that he was just not connecting. I did not realize that, he was really struggling with sleep last night, and until he was falling asleep during the rosary. So mea culpa. I really, really messed that one up. Yeah. So this is generally a sign when I see my partner getting really short with my kids too. Like normally he kind of would, flow pretty well through this and that, but, and it's like, okay, didn't handle that discipline really well, started yelling a bit too much. I'm like, okay, he's really overwhelmed. So these are some signs in my partner, and being able to say that back to him, like, oh, I noticed. I'm sorry I missed it earlier. I see it now. What do you need from me, right? List one thing your partner did this past week that you appreciated or made you feel supported. So this quarantine has really made me feel like, wow, I have a lot more resentments built up than I realized, right? I'm just getting just real irritable about a lot of things or whatever. And so I was kind of irritable about yet another 4 baskets of laundry in my living room and all those kinds of things. And then I was in my room and I was trying to do my nightly routine or whatever. I looked over and there was this 2 baskets of my laundry that my husband folded. I thought, oh gosh, it just meant so much to me. Deeds of service is all me, right? I love that. So, to be able to communicate that to him overtly, like, oh my gosh, that helped me so much. Like a little bit of order in my house, just these 2 baskets of laundry. Just really, yes, awesome. That made me feel so supported. He recognized that I needed this extra help, and he was fantastic. Other than that, just bring me a cup of coffee at any time, and I find that to be the greatest level of support. Okay. All right. So the last question here is super hard. List one emotion you are struggling with when being open with your partner. Now, a lot of us come from family systems where emotions were either expressed as something kind of scary. Maybe there was a lot of yelling. Maybe there were threats. Maybe it was, very scary for us as a child because maybe it felt like, oh gosh, is my family going to break apart? Or maybe it did. And so that level of emotion and communication was just really terrifying, right? It equals loss to us. Or sometimes we come up from family systems and it's like, everything's perfect. We don't talk about anything. Why would you be upset? And it's just like, okay, well then something must be wrong with me that I would be upset or feel resentment or anger at any given point. So I must be a bad person, or there's something really broken here that I would, have any resentments or unforgiveness or criticize my partner in any way. And so a lot of times what happens in the breakdown of emotional intimacy, just like the couple I described in the beginning of this talk, is that, there can be a lot of fear in being that open and that vulnerable, and a lot of shame in being that open and vulnerable, right? So the engineer in that story was all about well, I put in the formula, the outcome should be expected, right? I did the things. And so he was feeling a lot of failure. He was feeling a lot of shame by saying that he was scared. He was terrified that he was failing. He was feeling this beautiful woman who was just full of life, and she was miserable, and he just did not understand. He couldn't understand her at all at that point. So the emotions attached with being really vulnerable with my partner really do need to be highlighted, because that is a way of saying to our partner, you are so important to me that I want to be able to have this level of honesty with you and to wrestle with some of these things. But I am so terrified that when I get this open, that, that will end up being something that's hurtful, either to me or to you, or that it signifies something that I can't fix. So kind of ending with that question is a way of kind of inviting your partner in and saying, this is, this is hard, I need help with it. This is another opportunity to reach towards your partner and to say, hey, I'm struggling and I need your support, right? So even through this, help me know how to talk to you about my fears. Help me know how to talk to you about my needs. And that is really, really, that's just really good stuff, right? So when your partner sees that, you need help and they want to move towards you, that's emotional intimacy. That is indeed. Most couples kind of end this activity with some sort of prayer or closure. I also put some real time parameters on this. Like, this isn't a 3-hour conversation. This isn't like, battle this out all night kind of thing or whatever. No, it is meant to be kind of a touching point for handling a lot of really difficult content in a very structured way. A lot of times couples get like just completely kind of lost in the content, right? They find the bad guy, right? That's one of the demon dialogues we talk about in EFT. And they get stuck in kind of like arguing their case, and they're pushing their partner away. They're protesting more. So instead, this structure is meant to kind of orient them back to looking at their partner as somebody that they want to help, somebody that they want to understand their needs and they want to be able to meet those needs. So it's very much an attachment-oriented activity. So I want to, because I don't want to go too long, because I know those questions and I see some questions here. So I'm going to kind of end the discussion on the check-in there, and I'm going to kind of go to some questions. So if you have additional questions, you can kind of put them in the chat. But I see one. How do you handle when a grievance is set forth, but the other person doesn't feel responsible for wrongdoing? Oh, that's really, really good. So this is, I'm going to answer your question with a question, which is like a complete violation, right? You shouldn't do that. But what's the goal, right? What is the goal? So sometimes what you were doing in airing our grievance is communicating our experience of something. Do we always get the experience where somebody kind of agrees and affirms that, yes, that is true? Often this doesn't happen. And often that's where couples get stuck, because it's arbitrating whether or not somebody's position is true or something did happen. So this will kind of block the emotional intimacy. Where I would encourage this couple to remain in the emotional experience of it. When this thing happened, this was how I experienced it internally. This was the I feel statement. And this is also the next step, I need statement. So let's say, for example, somebody, let's get a kind of a good one going, right? Somebody, you asked your partner not to do something, right? Like, hey, don't spend that money on that activity or that purchase or whatever. And they kind of did it. And then you end up in a battle of like, okay, well, I didn't say I wasn't going to buy it, or maybe, hey, the detail is we could afford it. I don't see why you have a big deal kind of thing. And then the discussion ends up being like kind of invalidating each other's argument and experience instead of validating each other as a person. So when the grievance is set forth and the other person doesn't concede to it and doesn't agree to it, then we stay with the emotional experience. And this is how I feel. And this is how I experience that. And then the conflict becomes the argument. The conflict becomes the enemy and not my partner. So to move it away from the language of you did this thing to me, or you were the bad guy, to this thing created pain and division between us. This thing hurt our relationship. And how do we heal from this thing? How do I begin to be vulnerable again and to trust again if we don't acknowledge each other's internal experience of that emotion, right? So the check-in is about moving away from content necessarily. Not that content isn't important, but first we have to get the skill of having the ability to communicate with each other on the emotional level, on the experiential level, so that the focus becomes the relationship and the health of the relationship, and our ability to reach towards each other and expect that the other person is going to be there. So I hope, without getting into a specific example and giving me more details, that is pretty much what I would kind of encourage in a therapeutic relationship with a couple. I would say, okay, let's move off the content for a second. Let's look at our process. Let's look at what we're arguing for, and what's the goal here. Does that make sense? I don't know if there was a follow-up question to that at all. Okay. So I don't know if I want to throw it back to Father Sean or to Marilyn. I don't know if there's any thoughts that they might have or any additional questions that are popping up.
Some thoughts. Great job. This was super interesting. And I love, we printed our checklist while you were talking. You can find it on the Family Life Office Facebook page for those who are hoping to follow along or print it out, just so that you can kind of work through that. I really like this list one thing that you did this past week to make your partner's life more difficult. I feel like that's a really good question for self-reflection, to be where kind of like an examination of conscience. Yeah. Right? Where you're not oh, I just am doing this to feel terrible. It's okay, so what are my patterns of behavior that I don't want in my life anymore?
Yeah, and couples tend to fall into these kind of patterns of very black and white thinking, and also very much bad guy, victim. And we, especially in EFT, we talk about pursuer, withdrawer dynamic.
Yeah.
And so, it's helpful. Oh, is that?
Sorry, Mitch is checking his phone and his reflections in the window. We're super classy here. He's here.
So, go for it, sorry, guys. not intending to distract, but I guess I have that effect.
A lot of self-knowledge there. A lot of okay, yes. Very good. Good example. Yeah. It's interesting how we can get really locked in to our own kind of experience of things, and our own perceptions. I mean, it's kind of a human thing, But then when the questions kind of force us out of our own experience and then kind of alter our gaze into trying to pick up on what my partner's needs might be, or what their signs are, or how my responses impacted them, it does begin to kind of deepen the potential for change, right? Because it's not just about sitting there waiting for your partner to stop being selfish and get off their phone and all that kind of stuff, right? It's because relationship is a dyad. I mean, there's two people, and the interaction, what you do elicits something as well. So you have to approach it from yourself. Both sides. Yeah, most times people come to couples theory, the example in the beginning. I mean, his list was everything she was doing wrong and everything he had done right. So it was pretty much that kind of black and white. I can't even see my own stuff, right? He couldn't even spell the word emotion. I mean, he just this vivacious woman he married because he was clearly drawn to the experience of emotion somehow. I thought it was fantastic. Wow, look at that. I wonder what it would be like to feel something. And it just really he just couldn't. Yes. But he had no insight that he was just completely not responding to any of her reaching towards him for show me that you love me, help me feel loved, help me feel important to you, and not kind of a variable in your formula. So each partner, no matter whether or not you totally think your partner's the villain, everybody has some areas of growth. Everybody has something that they can kind of bring towards that emotional discussion that does help change the dynamic.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. Well, I think that we will go ahead and call it a night as far as the date night is concerned, unless Father has anything that he wants to add, I'm going to go ahead and put up the exit poll here. You're welcome to vote on that if you wish.
I don't have anything to add. I'm just really grateful to you, Marilyn, for organizing these date nights, and to Dr. Shannon Mullen for being here to present to all of us. So I really appreciate your time and your expertise. I just came on at the end, but what I heard sounded amazing.
Yeah, it was great. Really good information.
Oh gosh, you guys are so much fun. Yeah.
Move to Lincoln.
Oh my gosh, it's too cold there. I can't.
It is cold. That is, it would be a different climate. We have less bugs though, I think, than probably.
Oh gosh, you don't have the gnats that we have. I know, it's awful. It really is awful. But I'm not an outdoors person anyway. I mean, I'm just inside. But yeah, I mean, it is wonderful. Like, thank God for the technology and that we can like really have community in this way.
Yeah.
That even though I've never been to Lincoln, and maybe I'll never ever step foot in Lincoln. I hope I do one day, but that there's still people there that I can kind of interact with them. I'm happy to meet all of you.
Yeah. Yeah, Dr. Mullen said she might join us for the next date night so she can watch your presentation and then critique your speaking skills, Father. So
Excellent.
She said critique.
That'd be great. Can I close with prayer?
Yeah, that would be great.
All right. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus, we thank you for just the gift of marriage and the gift of our spouses that you've given us to help us to experience your love, your community, and your life. We ask your blessing upon all of these couples watching this webinar, upon all who will watch this webinar, and upon Mitch and Marilyn and Shannon for just the work that they've done and the gift that they are. Just continue to open us to your grace and help us to deepen and strengthen our intimacy with you and with each other during this time. And through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Saint Joseph, and all the saints, may Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
All right, and we are planning to do date night next week with Father Sean Kilcawley, the world famous, speaking to us from a chapel. Who knows where he'll be next week. He's been changing his Zoom background to different famous churches. So it's like where in the world is Carmen Sandiego except Father Sean Kilcawley. So we'll be back next week. So if you want to get the information for that, it'll be on the Family Life Office Facebook page, just like all of these have been, and we'll be streaming it via the webinar and then Facebook Live as well. So we hope to see you guys next week. Thank you again, Dr. Mullen. This was really great, and we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and share your wisdom with us and share this excellent tool. And hopefully it will be fruitful for a lot of marriages. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you being with us tonight.
God bless.
And hope to see you all next week. So thanks so much. We'll catch you then. Toodaloo.
Date night quarantine edition.
Date night quarantine edition. Because it's never going to end.
Oh, that's not a good one to end on.
Okay. Bye-bye.